Tonight on PBS News Weekend, extreme weather across dozens of states home to more than 100 million people unleashed tornadoes and fanned the flames of wildfires and deadly dust storms. Then how the children of Sudan are bearing the brunt of the violence in that country's brutal civil war. And why a growing number of young adults are swapping college plans for training in skilled trades.
There is a shortage of skilled tradesmen. And I think the younger generation is realizing that they don't necessarily have to go to college to make good money.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by...
In 1995, two friends set out to make wireless coverage accessible to all. With no long-term contracts, nationwide coverage, and 100% U.S.-based customer support. Consumer Cellular. Freedom calls.
The ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm John Yang. A second round of violent weather is barreling across the central and southern United States after a deadly and destructive Friday night. The storms have spawned violent tornadoes and fanned wildfires and dust storms that have claimed at least 17 lives and destroyed scores of homes. More than 200,000 people are without power across 5 states. Many of the fatalities have been in Missouri, where at least 4 tornadoes touched down. The National Weather Service says there's a heightened threat of tornadoes tonight, stretching from the Deep South to the Ohio River Valley. Earlier, I spoke with Matthew Capucci, senior meteorologist at MyRadar. He's in Mississippi tracking the storms. I asked him how unusual a multi-day tornado outbreak like this is.
So either of these two different events would in and of themselves be very significant. Last night we saw roughly 140 tornado warnings in a 24-hour period with numerous fatalities and at least 18 tornado warnings simultaneously. So last night was a big deal. And yet that's the appetizer for what's been happening all day today into the evening hours. We have a level 5 out of 5, a high risk, which is issued only less than 1% of the time. And so it's a top tier event anyway. The verbiage the National Weather Service is using is downright alarming when they say things like volatile, intense, long-track tornadoes.
Long-track tornadoes, explain that and why they're so dangerous.
So most tornadoes tend to be towards the lower end of the scale, an EF0, 1, or 2 on the 0 through 5 scale. Today, long-track, strong and violent tornadoes, we're talking like EF3, EF4 plus, winds of 160 plus miles per hour. And the other thing too, these supercells, the parent rotating storms, will be self-sustained for a long time because the atmosphere is so favorable for that these tornadoes can stay on the ground for 15, 20, 30 minutes, maybe close to an hour in a few instances, leading to very long damage tracks.
What are the ingredients in the atmosphere and the environment that make this all so conducive?
In essence, you need 2 ingredients. You need CAPE, or juice, how warm and moist is the atmosphere, and you need spin. That spin comes from changing winds with height. Now, it's warm, it's humid. We have Gulf moisture wafting northwards right now, so the atmosphere is very juiced up. But at the same time, the winds at the surface are out of the south or southeast, but aloft, they're more out of the southwest. So any storm that grows tall enough will feel those changing winds and will rotate, in some cases, quite profusely.
This increase in intensity and also the long-lasting, these long-lasting storms, how much of this is due to climate change, or is any of it due to climate change?
It's really not that closely linked to climate change. You know, the spring months every year tend to be a really rough time. We have the insurgences of Gulf moisture and a little bit of leftover cold from winter, and those two seasons kind of battle it out during March, April, May. Realistically, if you're going to get big tornadoes, it'll be over Mississippi or Alabama this time of year. That said, we do know that wintertime events, when the atmosphere is warming a little bit more, tend to be overachieving a bit more thanks to the warming atmosphere. So there's a little bit of a role, but really, it's a time of year.
What's your advice, or what do you say to people who's living in those areas or maybe under tornado watches or warnings?
In an episode like this, we want people to take action ahead of time. Ordinarily, folks wait until a tornado warning is issued before they seek shelter. But on a day like today, a night like tonight, if people are in a tornado watch, it's probably a good idea to get to a site-built location, someplace with a below-ground shelter, even before any warnings are issued. You never want to be more than 5 minutes away from a shelter on a night like tonight, so that way, if a warning's issued, you can just duck and cover real quick, and you don't have to worry about moving locations. If you have elderly family, friends, loved ones, check in with them. Make sure they have a plan too. It's one of those nights we have to be good neighbors.
And Matthew, to help people out, they hear all these watches, warnings, and that's alerts and that sort of things. What's the difference between a watch and a warning?
So a watch means conditions are favorable for tornadoes to form. Guys, that's the edge of the tornado right there. A warning means that we're seeing one on radar or in person. Something is imminent or occurring. So watch just means, hey, watch out. A warning means take action right now, shelter right now. The warnings are those ones that buzz on your phones. Now, the National Weather Service is calling this a PBS, or a particularly dangerous situation. Those type of watches are only issued about 7% of the time, but you're 3 times more likely to be hit by a violent tornado.
Matthew Capucci in Mississippi, thank you very much and be safe.
Thank you.
In other news, talks between Israel and Hamas on the next phase of the ceasefire remain stalled. Hamas says it will only release American-Israeli hostage Idan Alexander and the bodies of 4 other captives if Israel implements the latest U.S.-backed proposal. Hamas said talks on the second phase of the ceasefire would have to begin the day of the hostage release and last no longer than 50 days. Israel would also have to resume the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. This as Israeli airstrikes killed 9 people in northern Gaza. A local watchdog group said the dead included 3 Palestinian journalists. U.S. forces carried out a series of strikes on Yemen's capital, Sana'a, in an effort to stop Houthi rebel attacks on commercial vessels and U.S. warships in the Red Sea. President Trump warned that if the attacks in the busy maritime corridor don't stop, hell will rain down upon you like nothing you have ever seen before. Mr. Trump also warned Iran to stop supporting the group. A Houthi spokesman said at least 9 civilians were killed and 9 others injured. Earlier this week, the Houthis said they would resume attacks on Israeli ships in response to Israel's blockade of Gaza, but no attacks have been reported. In a highly unusual move, the United States has expelled South Africa's ambassador. In a post on X, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool is a race-baiting politician who hates America. The ambassador had criticized the Trump administration in a webinar for a South African think tank. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said he wants to repair the relationship and maintain a strong tie with the United States. This is the latest in the escalating dispute between the Trump administration and South Africa. Last month, President Trump signed an executive order offering white South Africans a rapid pathway to U.S. citizenship, saying they're being discriminated against. Earlier, Mr. Trump cut off aid to South Africa. Journalists at the federally funded news outlet Voice of America have been put on paid administrative leave. In an email Saturday, staff was also told they must be available to return to work on 1 day's notice. The agency that runs Voice of America was among those dismantled under an executive order President Trump signed on Friday. VOA was created in 1942 to counter Nazi propaganda. During the Cold War, it sought to bring news to people behind the Iron Curtain. Today, it broadcasts in more than 40 languages to a global audience of 427 million people. And 2 stranded astronauts are one step closer to coming home. A new crew is heading to the International Space Station aboard a rocket that NASA and SpaceX launched last night. They'll replace astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams, whose 1-week mission stretched into 9 months when technical issues prevented their return to Earth. Still to come on PBS News Weekend, how children are being victimized in Sudan's brutal civil war, and why many from Generation Z are ditching college for training in skilled trades.
This is PBS News Weekend from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington, home of the PBS NewsHour, weeknights on PBS.
This week, the head of the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, told global leaders Sudan's humanitarian crisis is the world's biggest and most devastating. A new UNICEF report says 30 million people are in need of humanitarian aid, more than half of them children. Many of them face threats of violence and sexual assault on a daily basis. The report also says that in fewer than 2 years of conflict, the number of people at risk of gender-based violence has more than tripled to more than 12 million people, or 25% of the population. Ali Rogan spoke with UNICEF spokesperson Tess Ingram, who recently traveled to Sudan.
Thank you so much for joining us. Tess, what are the major findings from this report?
This report tells us that we're facing a very serious situation in Sudan with sexual violence. It is being used as a weapon of war to instill fear in communities. The data that we got from service providers in Sudan shows that there have been 221 cases of rape perpetrated against children since the beginning of 2024. And if that alone isn't shocking, it tells us that there are really young children in that cohort, as young as 1 year old. And the cases of rape are being perpetrated right across the country. So this is not an isolated incident. It is widespread terror being waged across Sudan.
To what extent is the civil war fueling this sexual violence?
We know that sexual violence existed, including being perpetrated against children in Sudan before this conflict. But we've seen it resurge again, and we've seen it happen in a number of different scenarios of armed men as they come into a city, taking young girls from their families and holding them against their will. We've seen families fleeing that fear of that violence and death, only to find themselves apprehended or put in harm's way. And again, when people get to places that they think are safe, they are not safe. The violence follows them. And that is consistent in many locations across the country of Sudan right until today.
We have a soundbite from a victim that you interviewed on the ground. We're calling her Omnia, and she talked to you about what she witnessed while she was abducted and held and mistreated by armed groups. That included witnessing acts of sexual violence. Take a listen.
I endured this suffering and torment for 19 days. Throughout the 19 days, there were daily rapes. Every day there were rapes. Every day there was a crime. During those 19 days, I lived in hell. These people are not human beings. They subjected us to insults, humiliation, fear, terror, and starvation.
Is that similar to other stories that you've heard throughout the region?
I spent 2 weeks in Sudan, spending time with these incredibly brave survivors. I think it's important for us to understand the culture in Sudan blames the survivor and not the perpetrator for the sexual violence. And so they live with a tremendous amount of social stigma and fear of retribution. So it's incredibly brave for these survivors to speak. And yes, I interviewed dozens over 2 weeks, hearing their stories about their experiences. But the consistent part was, in most cases, these are children, they are young women who were trying to survive an awful, violent conflict only to be raped, and in many cases physically beaten, threatened. They had loved ones killed in front of them. The youngest survivor I interviewed was 5 years old. This should not happen to anybody, let alone to children in such a vulnerable position.
What are the impacts on the wider society? You know, the relatives, family members of the victims, and is this happening in places that people fleeing the violence are seeking safety and shelter?
People in Sudan now live in fear of this happening to them and to their families. And so what it has done is it creates a motivation to run and to leave when conflict descends on people's cities. It causes massive displacement alongside the other challenges that the conflict brings, like malnutrition and like bombardments. But sexual violence is also causing people to be displaced. Men, women, children. Frontline workers I spoke to talked about cases within the communities where these displaced people are living. Maybe it's dark, they have to make a long walk to a water point. In those sorts of situations, they are again vulnerable to sexual violence.
How is UNICEF helping the survivors of these assaults?
We're working across Sudan to bring the supplies and services that survivors need. But more than that, we're trying to prevent this from happening. We're doing advocacy with the parties to the conflict to remind them of their obligations under international humanitarian law to protect children. We're also working on preventative methods such as training sessions and awareness sessions for frontline workers and for young girls. We're also providing cash assistance to try and help those families when they flee get to places that are safer. And if that fails and we aren't able to prevent the rape, then we are providing supplies and services like mental health support, like medical kits for hospitals, and the other life-saving equipment that people need.
Tess Ingram with an important look at what's happening on the ground in Sudan. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
As the average cost of college in the United States soars, more young people are being drawn to skilled trades. It's part of a career rethink among Gen Z, who've been called the tool belt generation. Here's special correspondent Christopher Booker.
There's 7 different types of harnesses, right? So you're going to help him dress out.
The task is simple enough. Put on a safety harness, secure the ladder, and climb up.
Identify three items that you see up there.
This exercise is all part of an Introduction to Construction course at Westchester Community College. And for the students, it's a first step toward a career in the skilled trades. The certificate they get from completing this class opens the door to any trade they may be interested in.
You've got to start somewhere. And this program right here is the kind of thing that will get your foot in the door. They can build upon this and get into more specific training, plumbing, electrical, HVAC. How did you guys make out at the career fair?
Thomas Stewart, a retired steam fitter and member of New York's Local 21 Plumbers and Steam Fitters, has been an adjunct instructor with Westchester Community College for the past 7 years. Since COVID, he says the number of students walking into his course has increased substantially. And the rise is happening nationwide. According to the National Student Clearinghouse, the number of students in vocational-focused community college has risen by nearly 16% since 2020.
Somehow word must have gotten out, and I've known this for years, that there is a shortage of skilled tradesmen. And I think the younger generation is realizing that they don't necessarily have to go to college to make good money. Skilled tradesmen in this country can make 6 figures. I'm taking it nice and easy.
Through Local 21, Stewart receives health care and retirement benefits. In its effort to keep its rosters filled, Local 21 offers apprenticeship programs to train young people and everything to do with pipes, from plumbing to sprinklers.
And when they're an apprentice, that's where you get to a scenario where you actually will be working and studying?
Earn as you learn. We like to say it like that because you can work your 8-hour shift during the day, and usually it's 2, sometimes 3 nights a week. You'll have to go to school.
When someone enters the apprenticeship program, do they receive benefits as well? Is that
Absolutely, right from the start.
So health care,
Yeah,
in the pension?
yeah.
While the stories vary from student to student, some of the young people who come through Stewart's classroom are not coming right from high school.
Right after high school, I went into college at Penn State. I spent about 2 years there. I was studying data science and astrophysics, but eventually I dropped out during the pandemic.
After a bit of time at home, Carson Schrock found an entry-level position as a machinist.
Originally, they had me just doing some odd jobs around the shop, trying to find what my role would be. And eventually I got moved on to this 9-axis CNC machine.
An advanced manufacturing process, computer numeric control, or CNC, allows a machinist to create complex and complicated parts. Schrock spent the last year with Westchester Community College, working to earn a roster of CNC certifications.
So when you were in high school, was pursuit of a trade at all part of the conversation?
Not really, no. It was mostly about like what field of computer programming I would be in. Data science was close to what I wanted to do with the programming and making things, but I wanted to do something with my hands, something that left me with like a physical thing.
While Schrock came to the trades after 2 years in college, Stewart says the renewed interest has made its way to high school as well.
So in our department, it was a concerted effort.
Sarah Hall is an assistant principal of White Plains High School in White Plains, New York.
We've been bringing in local tradesmen. We had Local 3 in, we had our sheet metal workers in. We're trying to bring them in so we as adults can learn more about the trades so that we can better inform our kids on what their options are.
Has the school started to offer more by way of what would be historically called vocational technology classes?
Yeah, so we're going to start demolition on our 75 acres, and we're building a career and technical building.
Wow, so you guys are really all in.
So we're excited, yes, yes.
What about the conversation with parents? Has that changed?
Parents are open, but there are times where we have to have tough conversations with those parents and say, you know what, this might not be the path that you thought you would want for your child, but they're going to be successful no matter what they do. We just need to support them in getting there. But I do think that parents' perspective is going to start changing as society changes, right? I think that's important about having these conversations is we need to demystify the trades.
In 2023, Hall says 11% of White Plains graduates either went into the military or into a trade. Last year, it was 13%.
You know, your top tier college is over $90,000 a year. Kids are starting to look at that. And society says you have to go to college to be successful. What we're trying to say is that's not always 100% accurate. Having a college degree does help you financially. However, money doesn't equal happiness.
With reports that the U.S. construction industry alone will need to attract over 450,000 workers to meet industry demand this year, many in Gen Z may well be able to find out if Harris is correct. For PBS News Weekend in Westchester, New York, I'm Christopher Booker.
That's another way.
Now online, 2.5 years after becoming the first state to ban abortion after Roe v. Wade was struck down, Missouri abortion clinics are reopening their doors. All that and more is on our website, pbs.org/newshour. And that is PBS News Weekend for this Saturday. Tomorrow, we'll look at the DOJ layoffs at the FAA and what they could mean for aviation safety. I'm John Yang. For all of my colleagues, thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by
Certified Financial Planner Professionals are proud to support PBS News Weekend. CFP professionals are committed to acting in their clients' best interest. More information at letsmakeaplan.org.
the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.